The X-Men in the world of video games delivered some truly high quality experiences during the 90s. Konami's X-Men arcade game, the Clone Wars games on the Sega Mega Drive, and Mutant Apocalypse on the Super Nintendo all offered up amazing gameplay. But a strong case could be made that their potential in gaming would apex when they were introduced to the world of fighting games. X-Men Children of the Atom, released in arcades on the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation, was brilliant. This Capcom outing introduced air combos, multi-layered stages, and a range of features that hadn't been seen with Capcom games previously. Things would only tend to get better from here, with countless crossover games being produced that mixed up Marvel and Capcom characters together. Today though, we are going to look at a different X-Men fighting game, and one of which is nowhere near as widely discussed as its Capcom counterparts we just mentioned. So with all of that said, hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the story of X-Men Next Dimension, and why no one plays this one. Yeah. Let's roll the clock back to the year 2002. If a child was born this year in America, by now they'd finally be able to consume alcohol, even though in some states they'd have been allowed to legally own a gun for years. What a crazy place. Strange observations aside, speaking of 2002, this was a time period whereby comic book movies were beginning their domination of the multiplex, with Spider-Man making his major blockbuster motion picture debut, along with Blade and Men in Black returning to theatres. But while Blade can stake his name to kickstarting the Marvel movie era, the mutants of the X-Men came to cinemas in the summer of 2000 and would truly start a revolution in motion picture houses. The movie, simply named X-Men, would set a high watermark, turning characters such as Storm, Cyclops, Magneto and Rogue, who were largely limited to the knowledge banks of children reading comic books and watching the famous 90s cartoons, into household names. The film led to significant changes to the comic book designs and storylines at the time, and the influence can still be felt to this day. Marvel, the masters of synergy, would promote the movie with fighting games like X-Men Mutant Academy and Mutant Academy 2. Likewise, these games would promote the movie, both around its release and a year later. It's like an Ouroboros of mutant domination. But with movies taking time to produce, if Activision fancied having a Mutant Academy 3 created, this time they wouldn't exactly have a new sequel to derive stuff from. So it seemed the era in which the Mutant Academy games thrived had come to an end, and with the PlayStation 2 becoming more and more popular, the PS1 was left in the dust as a budget or kiddie downgrade. So in this brave new era of console entertainment, while there was no new X-Men movie to draw inspiration from, Activision and development house Paradox Development wanted an X-Men fighting game regardless, a title that could potentially flourish on Sony's latest platform. This of course brings us to X-Men Next Dimension, a game that is colloquially referred to as X-Men Mutant Academy 3, thanks to its lineage. This would be the first title in the series to be released across multiple consoles, breaking free of PlayStation adherence. This time around, Paradox Development would develop the title for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, while leaving porting duties to Exact Entertainment for the GameCube release to be made too. All three of these efforts would come out in late October in the Americas, followed by late November in Europe, but interestingly, not in Japan at all. You see, Japan skipped out on this release despite enjoying releases of previous versions. Who knows, maybe they were just salty about how the Dreamcast, the best home for Marvel vs Capcom 2 at the time, came to such an untimely demise a year before. It was very sad indeed. With the evolution of console capabilities, the brass tacks of Next Dimension would evolve into a 3D space, providing multiple levels of 3D stages. Much like Mortal Kombat 3 and Dead or Alive, players in this otherwise traditional fighter could knock each other into different chunks of the level, allowing players to explore beautifully rendered locations in nearly 20 stages, such as the Danger Room, X-Mansion, Asteroid M, Savage Land, and a number of other iconic comic book locations. The game largely stays true to its predecessors in these fights, but wears even more of a Marvel vs Capcom influence on its spandex sleeves this time around. Players have a variety of special moves. They can use their super bar for a variety of projectile supers, physical supers, attack throw supers, and unique supers. Projectile supers are exactly what they sound like. Players either shoot a straight beam, like Cyclops' iconic attacks, or multi-hit attacks, like Gambit's 52 card pickup. Physical supers are attacks that use your own body, like a particularly strong punch. Attack throw supers can only do damage if the opponent isn't blocking, and characters like Toad and Beast have a number of these. Unique supers are ones that don't really fit into any other category, such as Wolverine using his regeneration abilities in the middle of a match. Speaking of Wolverine, you may be surprised to see that various attacks of his are straight from the Marvel vs Capcom franchise, which is very interesting considering this one is from a completely different development source. The cast of the game range from iconic characters you've seen and played as dozens of times before, and it's hard to find an X-Men game that doesn't have Cyclops, Gambit, Rogue, Storm and Wolverine somewhere in the mix, and Magneto, Sabretooth, Toad and the Blob are some of the more common villains too. But Forge, Bastion, Lady Deathstrike, 2 versions of Phoenix, 2 types of Sentinel, and 2 iterations of Psylocke, now that's a bit different, isn't it? With the expanded cast of characters available for players on these new consoles, the B tier of Marvel's mutants found a way to the mainstream gaming market. What is also of note is that on top of the 24 characters shared across all the versions, Next Dimension would feature a fighter who was exclusive to a particular console version of this game. Remember, this was the early 2000s, a particularly combative and crowded time of video game exclusives. In this battle for supremacy, it would be the Xbox that would get a standout, major exclusive new fighter. Wait, did I say major? I meant Pyro. Yes, Pyro, the man whose mutant power equates to could be replicated by Iron Man with dual flamethrower arms. Sure, Spider-Man was a hidden character in the previous iteration, and he had a major motion picture coming out this year. But Peter Parker instead goes completely absent in this iteration. Well, not completely. The story of this game is designed as a sequel to the comic series Operation Zero Tolerance. The 1997 comic book event followed the iconic Onslaught saga, and focused on Bastion and Henry Peter Gyrich using the US government to initiate a program to kill all of the mutants across the country. Patrick Stewart, reprising his newly minted role as the voice of Professor Charles Xavier, narrates the story of the game, revealing that Prime Sentinels have recovered the defeated Bastion from S.H.I.E.L.D., leading to a post-apocalyptic world where the Sentinels have taken out all of their threats, including Tony Iron Man Stark, Benjamin the Thing Grimm, and everyone's favourite wallcrawler Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. Or at least that's what the Danger Room scenario that starts the game features as an Easter egg anyway. The Danger Room session is interrupted by the monthly attack from the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, leading to Engineer Forge being kidnapped and the General starting off the action in the game. The X-Men and the Brotherhood must join forces to defeat Sentinels under the control of Bastion, to save not only all of mutant kind, but humanity and their heroes as well. As a creative option you don't see in many fighting games, the story actually allows for multiple endings. With Bastion as the final battle, players have 3 chances to defeat him: Wolverine, Magneto and finally Phoenix. Depending on who wins the actual final bout, Dark Phoenix may or may not be released, destroying the moon and the Earth as a result. That pesky Dark Phoenix, always committing galactic genocide. What a scamp. If story mode isn't your jam, thanks to the limited character choices, you have a traditional arcade mode that allows you to fight over 8 battles, a 2-player versus mode, and survival challenge which goes exactly as you'd expect. Building on this, there's obviously a team mode and practice mode too, to further change things up. Actually, no, scratch that. Those were the GameCube exclusives. Possibly thanks to the limited storage of the GameCube disc, they kept exclusives to repurposing existing content, instead of adding a new character and stage like the Xbox got. For once, the PlayStation 2 was the least enhanced version. I guess they assumed the PS2 version of the game would be the easiest to sell anyway. Lastly, an assets mode lets you review all of the CGI movies you unlock throughout your gameplay, and players are encouraged to keep playing, unlocking new character skins throughout. While the main cast is based on the then current new X-Men and the extreme X-Men designs, the extra costumes are based on the animated series and other iconic imagery, including some new ones. With all this extra content, what did the media at the time think about the title? Well, IGN would note, though I'm not denying that Next Dimension isn't without its problems, it's not without a few good points either, and while I can't recommend this to anyone outside the devoted X-Men circle, or perhaps the occasional curious fight fan, a strong constitution and an open mind may yield a couple of smiles, and maybe even a certifiable good time. For those of you who are a little more forgiving, give it a rental at the very least. GameSpot would agree about the rental mindset, stating, the problems with the fighting system will probably keep you from playing X-Men Next Dimension extensively. It can be a fine game to play with casual gamer friends who are fans of the source material, but since a number of better fighting games starring the X-Men already exist, it's hard to get too excited about this one. In the end, even the most ardent X-Men fan should probably just rent Next Dimension rather than buy it. Personally, I can see why review scores from the time don't paint a picture as pretty with this one as with many other fighting games. In terms of visuals, X-Men Next Dimension was decent for its time. The character models are recognisable and capture the essence of their comic book counterparts, but the graphics lack the polish and detail that modern games offer. The environments, while varied, can sometimes feel repetitive and uninspired. One area where the game falls short is its controls and combat mechanics. The fighting system is relatively simplistic, relying on basic combos and special moves. The lack of depth in the combat can make the fights feel repetitive and shallow over time. The camera angles can also be problematic, occasionally hindering visibility during battles. Another drawback is the game's overall presentation and polish. The story mode is rather short and lacks depth, and the voice acting and dialogue can be subpar at times. The game also suffers from some technical issues, including occasional glitches and frame rate drops. While X-Men Next Dimension may appeal to die-hard fans of the X-Men franchise who are looking for a 3D fighting game experience, it ultimately falls short in several key areas. The lack of depth in combat, mediocre visuals and technical issues prevent it from reaching the level of quality found in other fighting games of its time. If you're a casual fan or not particularly invested in the X-Men universe, there are better options available from this genre. Keeping all of this in mind, it is easy to see why few people play this one, with it not having the same level of popularity as other X-Men fighters. Next Dimension hasn't seen a re-release, and it would be the end of an era for the heroes. Past this point, the comic company would hit a few further stumbling blocks with Marvel fighting games, with Marvel Nemesis, Rise of the Imperfects being a particular show in the years following, but that's certainly a story for another time. Anyway, if you'd like to hear more about the rebirth of the marvellous fighters, make sure you subscribe and let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this video. Then why not check out my recent upload on this overlooked Capcom fighting game. Yeah, cheerio.